Well, thank you very much. It is so great to be here talking about native plants, which is a passion of mine, um, cultivated from a number of years of consulting with homeowners about adding native plants to their landscaping. So today we're going to be, since we're not talking about planting on this very icy, cold, snowy day here in Illinois, since we can't really talk about planting, well, we kind of are. So we're going to talk about how to start some seeds so that you've got everything you need when it finally warms up enough for us to start some planting. So first off, what is winter sowing? So basically what you're doing is you're using those natural seasonal weather cycles to break the seed dormancy. So we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about why this is needed, but seeds of native plants are really tough and it's intentional. So in order to break through that and get them to germinate, they need to go through these winter freezes and thaws. It takes up less space than traditional seed starting methods, fortunately, and is really, really easy to do. So why do we want to do it? Well, again, it's really easy, but it saves money. For those of you who have bought plugs of native plants before, it's at a minimum $5 a piece for those little plugs. And so if you're planting a large area, that can get really expensive really fast. So as you see here in this little juice container, we started a whole bunch of seeds. Not all of those are going to be viable, but even if you get 4 or 5 plants out of there, that's at a minimum $25 you just saved. So it does save you money. It starts the plants faster. You've got them working on that seed coat all winter long, so they are ready to go once the weather is right. And you can get a better selection too. The nurseries that sell native plants are really only going to create plugs of their best sellers. You're not going to find some of the rarer, more unique kinds of plants, but you can find the seeds of them. So if you can start them yourself, it's going to be much easier for you to do on your own than to try and source them from somewhere far away. It's also less work. So traditional seed starting methods, you've got the big racks, you've got fans blowing on them, you've got lights on them. It's a lot of work. With winter sowing, you're letting nature do that work for you. And unlike traditional seed starting, you don't have to worry about damping off that fungal disease that is the death knell for your indoor started seedlings. We don't have those kinds of issues. We also don't have issues with white flies, having those inside like you might if you try to do them inside. And the hardening off period, right? How annoying is that to have to take plants outside for a little bit and then remember to bring them back in before it gets cold again and then take them back outside. You don't have to do any of that. Again, we're letting nature do all of this for us. And it's going to naturally stratify the seed. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. But again, if you were going to try and start these inside, you would still have to imitate that in the refrigerator. And a quick little story. I had gotten some seeds that needed to be stratified. I read about doing it in the refrigerator, thought no problem, put them in, threw them in the back of my fridge. About 2 months later, my husband is cleaning out the refrigerator and he's just about to throw out these seeds that I, until that point, had completely forgotten that I put in there. So then in a panic, I grabbed them and just threw them outside. And of course, nothing survived. So again, helps you to remember them and not forget them in the back of your refrigerator, but also to make it just easier, right? So I've said this word stratification a number of times. What does this mean? Well, these seed coats on these native seeds are super tough, right? The plant doesn't want to drop its seeds in the fall and have them sprout right away. If that were to happen, first frost, they're dead. So this seed coat is really, really tough. So if you just throw these seeds down in the soil, get them wet, absolutely nothing is going to happen. So this adaptation helps these seeds to survive through the winter, but it means that they have to go through this process now so that we can break through this seed coat. So they have to go through this repeated freeze thaw cycles, this period of cold forces water in there to eventually soften it enough that it can break open. Um, some other seeds need other types of processes called scarification, which the process that I've seen to manually do this involves a sandpaper block, like rubbing over the seeds with a sandpaper block to break them open. So the method depends on the plant. Different plants need different things based on what they're adapted to. But basically, it just means that something is needed to break this seed coat. So with our native plant seeds here, it's going to be these repeated cycles of freezes and thaws. It's going to help to get inside that seed coat. So what plants can be winter sown? Well, most of the natives, right? Lots and lots and lots of natives. So here we've got 3 examples of milkweeds that are native here where I'm at in the Chicagoland area, and also many other parts of the state and other states as well. On the left, we've got butterfly milkweed, which is a great native plant for home landscapings, right? Doesn't grow quite as tall as the common that you see there in the middle, that common milkweed. It can get pretty aggressive, gets, like 6 feet tall. Not always the best choice for a small front yard. So that butterfly milkweed there on the left is a great choice. There on the right, we see some swamp milkweed, and it's already got pollinators going to town on it. You see lots of life going on that swamp milkweed. And, these are all taken from my yard. So again, all things that can be grown around here. Milkweed can be notoriously difficult to start from seed. And the reason, again, is it needs this very specific stratification. So you can't just throw down the seeds in the spring and expect them to grow. Some other plants, wild garlic, wild onion, sometimes called ramps, right? This is one that's going to be really hard to find in the trade. So if that's something you're interested in growing and you have the right conditions for it, starting it from seed can be a good start. Wild columbine is another fun one. You can find this one in the nurseries, but it's so easy to start. Again, save your money. And then it will also move around your yard. So it's one of my favorites just because I'll plant it somewhere and then it shows up halfway across my yard the next year. And I'm like, how did you get there? Well, the animals like to move those seeds around. So it's not aggressive, but it will pop up in unexpected places. And it always makes me smile when I see those. And then we have some coreopsis. Again, one of my favorites. It just makes these huge masses of bright yellow, happy flowers. I love me some coreopsis. And there's a couple different types of it too. So again, take a look at your conditions, figure out what you want to plant, and then you can start them. Sedges are another great one, right? There is a sedge for every occasion. You got a wet, shady area that nothing will grow in. There's a sedge for that. You got a bright, dry, sunny area. There's a sedge for that. So sedges are another great one to start from seed. Indigo, another one of my favorites, right? And it gets nice, big, bushy. The cream is the one that's native in my area here, but the blue is also native-ish nearby, and native in some other nearby areas. So it's another great choice. And then, of course, we've got our asters. Asters make for a great fall color for your yard, but also that last food source for things like monarchs that are migrating down to Mexico. They need something to eat to help fuel them on their journey. And you got to have the asters. So again, another great choice. There are hundreds of different kinds of asters out there. Find the one that fits your space. But also things like poppy mallow, campanulas, anise hyssop, penstemon, coneflowers, black-eyed Susan. Again, the list is almost endless of things that you can winter sow. Check your seed packets for information, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So where do you get your seed from? Highly, highly recommend reputable online nurseries that specialize in native plants. While you can get them at big box stores, you can get them at conventional greenhouses. A lot of times what you're going to find are cultivars. And while the issue is large surrounding cultivars, if what you're going for are the straight species to plant in your yard to benefit those pollinators, you'll want to find those reputable online nurseries. And there's a number of them. Thankfully, there are more coming online all the time. So they are very easy to find. You can also harvest them yourself, but make sure you have permission. Obviously, it is illegal to go into a forest preserve or a park or property you don't own and harvest some seed out of there. Please don't do that. But you've got a friend who's got these plants out there, or sometimes you see the seed libraries, seed swaps. There's tons of seed swaps coming up in the spring. So definitely, I could do an entire webinar on how to harvest your own seed. Maybe we'll do that again at another time. But harvesting your own seed is another great way to get what you want. So how do we do this? Well, first step is, hey, now we're bringing in recycling to this too. So you want a container, plastic container, like a milk jug, or this here was I think it's a half-gallon sized water bottle. Just any kind of clear or semi-translucent container. And it's best if it has a handle, but it doesn't have to, just makes it easier to tote around. You want to make sure that water can get in and get out. Now, when do we start this? Well, the old wives' tale was to start winter sowing on the winter solstice. The problem with that is this year we had a really warm winter. So if you had started it back in December, it was probably not cold enough to really do it yet. So now that we're getting into the deep freeze part of winter, this is a great time. So January, early February, depending on your seed type, you'll want to make sure you know, again, how much time your seed needs, and the seed packet will tell you that. But figure out what you want to sow, read up on it, and then once you have your container, see here how we have cut the container. You want to make sure you leave a hinge, so don't cut all the way around, but leave about a good 2-inch hinge there so that you can open it up, but it still closes pretty easily. You got to be able to fit 4 inches of soil in there, so you'll want to make your cut maybe 5 to 6 inches up, and then make sure whatever container you have, you'll want another 4 inches of headroom on there too. So you can see here, we've got examples of lots of different types of containers that you can use for this. Produce containers, things that, you know, the lettuce or strawberries or something comes in, plastic juice bottles, milk jugs. You can even use flats, right? Just make sure they've got holes in the top. You want holes in the bottom so that your water is going to be able to drain out. So while you're cutting your bottle, leaving that hinge on there, also make sure you're adding some drainage holes to the bottom of it as well. You can also put some holes in the top too. And also, since I forgot to mention this, take the lids off, get rid of them. You're not going to use the lids on these bottles either. You want the moisture, the snow, everything. You want that to be able to get inside the container, because really what we're making here are little greenhouses. Also going to want to protect them from critters. So some people use something like chicken wire, hardware cloth, keep them in an area where the deer aren't going to get to them. Obviously, as you can see from that top picture, that is an issue I have in my yard. They particularly love my violets there. But, you know, squirrels, chipmunks, all of them would love nothing more than to get a hold of your seeds. So make sure that your containers are going to be protected from critters chewing their way into them. You also want to make sure you keep a journal on this. This just really saves you brain space. Trying to remember what worked, what didn't work, when did you start, that kind of thing. So write down your plant names, when you sowed them, how much you put in there, the date they germinated, all that kind of stuff. Keeping good detailed notes like that helps you in the long run to be more successful. All right, so we've got our containers prepared. Now we need to fill them. So you're going to get potting soil. You don't want to use seed starting mix that a lot of times has moisture additives to it to help keep them moist. That'll keep your soil too soggy. So don't use seed starting mix. Don't use anything with those moisture additives. And also be careful with compost. I can tell you honestly, I do compost here at my house, and I have never put compost into anything that hasn't cropped up with tomato seedlings. So you really, especially for natives, you don't need a lot of compost. Generally, your potting soil is going to have all the nutrients your little seedlings are going to need. So you're going to pre-moisten that. You want that soil to be pretty wet. You're not making mud pies here, but you want it to be pretty wet, where if you squeeze a handful of it, some water is going to drip out. So get that mix real wet, put about 4 inches into your container. And then you're going to add your seed. Now, again, read your seed label to see how deep these seeds need to be sown. A lot of times they just need to go right on top, or they'll say, no deeper than the width of the seed, which these things tend to be pretty tiny. So what you can also do is you can sprinkle them on top, give them a little press on the surface to ensure good seed to soil contact. And then you can sprinkle some unmoistened soil over the top of them, and then give them a little spritz of water. That helps to, again, not get them in the soil too deep, but get them just enough to where they'll be happy. Sometimes they want to be right on the surface. It'll say they actually need sunlight. So again, this is where reading your seed packet comes in handy. So then you're going to close up your jugs. This is why we have the hinge on there. So you're just going to flip that lid on there and then use some tape, duct tape, packing tape, something like that, just to close it up. You don't need to seal it up all the way around. Really, you're just trying to keep that hinge from flopping open. So just a little piece of tape on there to help keep that closed. And then we're going to put them outside and wait. So as I mentioned, we want to take a look at our seed packets here. So this is the back of a seed packet that I happen to get from Prairie Moon Nursery. Again, this is where knowing where you get them from is kind of important, because if you'll see, it's got this germination code on here. Now, Prairie Moon has their own keys for their germination codes. Other nurseries might use different codes to mean the same thing. So if you look, whenever Prairie Moon sends you seeds, they'll also send you a piece of paper that has their codes and instructions to go with it. So you can see here, C tells you that the seeds germinated after a period of cold, moist stratification. So this is what we're doing. And that number in the brackets there, that 60, means that's how many days. So these seeds are going to need a minimum of 60 days in order to germinate. So that's why we want to start them now to have them ready in time for spring, because they need those 60 days. I've seen them as high as 120 and as low as 30. So again, just read your packet to understand what we're doing. And again, here you can see where it says plant no deeper than the width of the seed. So for these prairie smoke seeds, these seeds were tiny, like they were little. So again, you're not burying them an inch deep like you would some other things. You're really just putting them on the surface. All right, so now we've got our jugs sealed. We want to make sure that we label. So permanent markers are not so permanent, as those of you may know who have tried labeling your plants in the summer. So you can try a wax pencil, or color code them with nail polish. I thought that was kind of a cool option too. And this is where journaling or keeping accurate records would be very useful. So the one with the blue dot is Penstemon or whatever you're doing. I have tried here a label maker with packing tape over the top. We'll see if that holds. I also tried paint pens. Another thing you can do is you can just put the labels inside your containers. That'll help protect them from the elements a little bit. Or if nothing else, just stick your seed packet inside the container too. They'll get wet and soggy, but it won't hurt anything and you'll still know what's in there. Now, while you're waiting, you want to check on them occasionally. This isn't just a set it and forget it kind of thing. You need to check them for condensation to make sure they're not getting too dry. So if you want to water them, if you see that they don't have condensation in the top, you can either drip it down the sides. We don't want to pour the water directly into the top because that might cause the seeds to splash out. So we want to gently do this. So pouring water down the side helps, or you can take a tray of water, since they have those holes in the bottom for drainage, you can just set the whole container and the soil will actually wick up the water and it'll go that way. So a couple of different ways to water these when you need to. So keep an eye on them too. When your seedlings emerge on a warm, sunny day, you can open them up just like you would a greenhouse or cold frame, something like that. Open them up, but then again, make sure you close them again at night before it gets too cold. So this is all part of our getting them used to the outdoor conditions. Now, when your seedlings have two sets of real leaves, so not what they call the seed leaves or the cotyledons, those first little halves of the seed that split open, when they have the first two sets of true leaves, or they're 2 inches tall, it's time to transplant. So you're going to water the container well. That'll help loosen things up, help them come out easier. And then you're going to cut blocks of soil out, or you can use a spoon to kind of scoop out the chunks. I like my soil knife. I love using my soil knife, goes everywhere with me when I'm out in the garden. So you can use that. Think brownie sized chunks of this soil. So you're obviously going to get multiple seedlings out of there. If you need to cut them back, I know it's very, very tempting just to pull them out, but that can disturb the roots of the ones you want to keep. So use a little pair of like nail scissors or something to cut the ones that you're going to prune out of there. And then you can either plant them directly in the ground, or if maybe you don't have time now, maybe you want to grow them up a little bit more, you can get a larger container. I've seen people use like the large quart yogurt containers, or if you have leftover pots from previous plants that you've bought, plugs, you can stick them in there to grow up. Whatever you want to do. And remember, natives really don't need a lot of fertilizer, so take it easy. You really don't need to add additional fertilizer when you're planting these. So we talked a lot about native plants. Why are we using native plants? Why are we so big on native plants here? Well, for one, they are easier maintenance than traditional. Now, notice I didn't say no maintenance. Nothing is no maintenance, but they are easier maintenance than many traditional things. We don't have to baby them, fertilize them every year. We don't have to give them additional water if we're in a drought period. This is what they're used to. Once they're established, they're good. They're used to our conditions. They're used to our cold, wet springs, our hot, dry summers. They're fine with that. So they're much easier to maintain than a lot of traditional landscaping. They're also lower cost to maintain. Again, we're not spending our money on fertilizer and water bills. And they support a variety of pollinators, right? Everybody's heard about the plights of our pollinators around. So if you're truly looking to do something good for our pollinators, this is the best thing that you can do, is give them something to eat. And hey, they're pretty. I think we are hopefully getting past the era of native plants are weeds. They are not weeds. They are just as attractive, just as beautiful to have in your home landscaping as many of the things that we've traditionally planted from Europe and Asia. And they support wildlife. So if you see there on the left, that is one of my milkweed plants, and you can see my milkweed plant has a little visitor there. That is a monarch caterpillar, a very young monarch caterpillar. And that little caterpillar is going to eat leaves and leaves and leaves and nothing but leaves for about 2 weeks until it turns into the adult form butterfly. So they need that milkweed. There's nothing else that those caterpillars can eat. So if they don't have milkweed to eat, there's no more monarchs. So that's why it's really important to have a variety of things, because if you look there down on the bottom, that is Zizia, also known as golden Alexanders. And I'll show you in a minute, it has some visitors as well, but not just for those insects, but our bird friends too eat both the seeds from the plants. I know my coneflowers every fall are filled with finches picking out the seeds from the coneflowers, but also to feed their young. So many, and I think most birds feed insects to their babies. Those insects are nutrient dense. I've heard, many times the protein and nutrition of beef even. So, I mean, hey, we got cicadas coming up if you want to eat those. Just kidding, just kidding. But our bird friends love feeding caterpillars to their babies. They need to. And the more caterpillars those baby birds eat, the healthier they're going to be, the more reproductively successful they're going to be. So if we want to support our bird friends, we plant not just for the seeds, but also for the caterpillars as well. And as I mentioned, that Zizia down there on the bottom, if we zoom in on that, you can see what looks almost like a little bit of bird poop there in the middle. That is actually a swallowtail caterpillar. And I think there's a second one there too that I didn't even see when I took this picture. So swallowtails eat things that are in the carrot family. So that's why you see them on dill and parsley and things like that in your garden. But the native plant that they eat, or at least one of them, is Zizia or golden Alexander. So another very pretty plant to have in your garden. Speaking of gardens, so here's one that I planted. Previously, there had been a large half-dead Colorado blue spruce. So took that out, prepped the bed, and planted a bunch of natives there. And you can see just the difference between May and July, how much those plants grew. And then again, a year later in May, this is what it looked like. So, ignore the oak tree that the very helpful squirrel planted for me down there in the bottom right. But, these plants really just got in and took off. So very helpful for our birds, for our insects, and like I said, it's beautiful for us too. Even now, covered in snow, this adds winter interest, right? All these plants with the snow on them, the bent stalks, it still looks nice even in the winter, having not really done a whole lot to clean it up, which I won't do until spring to help those things that are overwintering in the stalks of things here. But so that is my pollinator garden that I planted. So with that, you can view past recordings of the Four Seasons Gardening series. And if you wanted to go back and watch this one again, you can, as Andrew mentioned, this video will be up shortly. But you can see our past recordings there. And if you wouldn't mind taking this brief survey for us, you can scan that code with your phone or go to go.illinois.edu/native seeds to take our survey. Let us know what you thought. And that's me.